Hey, folks, Chris Gordon here, Unsung Heroes. Today, from England, I've got the one and only Scott McGill. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I'm going to start this off by saying one of my favorite quotes about you was by Bill Milkowski, who referred to you as the thinking man's Yngwie Malmsteen, which I thought was just a really good way to put it. You know,
Yeah, well,
um,
he's an amazing guy. He's the one that did that big Jocko book. The big
mhm.
that was the definitive biography of Jocko is Bill. Yeah, it was nice of him to do the liner notes for that album.
Yes. And I think it's poignant because your background and your career, which is insane, which I want to get to, is it really started in that kind of heavier rock kind of thing.
Yes,
Even though there's still elements of that going on with you now, I mean
yes,
it's vast. But I want to go back because you and I were in the scene, back the South Jersey scene,
yes.
the long hair, the Marshalls,
Of
the
course.
gloriousness
What
of just
what's better than that? What
yeah.
else
Well,
do you?
we turn on the Marshalls and you could blow dry your hair by the air being pushed. It was like that was
That's the sound.
that
Yep.
was the sound. But you started. I'm pretty sure I'm accurate with the year 1985 as the lead guitar player for Robert Hazard.
Yes.
So I was always curious because I got you know rest in peace, Robert. Such a
Yes.
great performer, and I did have it. I did spend some time with him. How did you get that gig? How did that happen
Um,
for you?
it, a friend of mine from high school named Lou Flacci actually helped me get that gig, and it was unexpected. I graduated high school and I was practicing and playing, and I got a phone call from somebody named Mike. I think his name was Vesper, and he was a drummer, and he had said that he had got my name from Lou, and that he had a band called Laura Mann and the Life Boys. And he said that they were being produced by, right? Yeah. Said they were being produced by Robert. And would I be
Okay,
interested in coming down? So I said, okay. I mean, I really didn't know anything about the music, Chris. I knew that it was new wave. I knew it was that time. And I went down there, and they were nice enough. And, they played me, they had a boom box, with a cassette, and played
right.
me a tune. Then we played it, another tune, then we played it. And they said, well, do you want the job? Do you want the gig? And I said, okay. I didn't really think much of it. And they said, well, Robert's going to be down next rehearsal. So, I went to the next rehearsal, and he was there, and he seemed like a nice guy. And, but after that, I just kind of thought about it, and I really wanted to play jazz and fusion and all these things. And I was going to college at the time. I was going to community college and trying to scrape some credits together. And I just called Mike back up. I said, I really appreciate it, but I'm going to bow out, actually. I just thought about it over the weekend. He said, okay. So we brought the cassette back, and that was it. So about 3 weeks later, I get a call, and the call is somebody named JR. And he said, I'm Robert Hazard's manager or Minder or something, and Robert wants to talk to you. And I said, all right. And he said, look, Scott, he goes, I need a guitar player. I got some big gigs coming up. I said, all right. And well, the big gigs turned out to be playing with Bill Cosby and David Brenner at the Robin Hood Del East in front of like 30,000 people. And then the next big gig was that 4th of July on the Parkway. It's still the biggest gig I ever did. It was
That's
like
right.
500,000 people there, and I was about 18 or 19 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, it was probably way too fast. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but I saw a lot of stuff, even in that short period of time with Robert. But he was always very nice to me. I have to say, he was good to me. Bought me an amplifier for the gig. I didn't have anything. I had a small combo. I had nothing. I had a little Carvin X amp or something. I really had nothing. And from there it was just it was quite a leap. So that's how I got that gig, and that lasted about a year, and then the gigs kind of dried up, and we all kind of went our own way.
So so you get the even before Robert Hazard. So you had said something a second ago that I thought was fascinating. So even from an early age, your focus was on jazz. Like, was there ever a
Yeah.
point where you were like, I'm a rock guy, or Was that
Yes.
okay?
And that's been my whole problem is I've got my foot in 15 puddles. Um, I started out playing blues rock, it was like 79. So I really started out listening to Hendrix and Trower, Robin Trower, and people like that, Johnny Winter. And then I got into metal. So all the new wave of British metal came in. So I got
Okay.
into, in fact, Nigel Glockler from Saxon is a great friend, and his wife Gina. They're wonderful. They live near here. I met him over here.
Okay.
But I couldn't get out of. I love that. I still do love that stuff. The Scorpions, like I loved all that stuff. Metal, so a UFO, and all this stuff
Yeah.
But I always loved jazz, and I always loved classical music from an early age. I liked Beethoven and Scarlatti and Bach. I was listening to harpsichord music, and then I was listening to blues rock. I was listening to metal. So that's the problem. Then I heard One of a Kind by Bruford and Alan Holdsworth and McLaughlin and Pat Martino. My problem is I can't commit to one. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't. That's my issue.
Okay, it's almost like a man without a nation,
Correct.
right? Like
Yes, I love all of it.
there's that trap where it's you're too rock for jazz, you're too jazz
Correct.
for rock.
Correct.
No. Now I'm not
Absolutely.
saying that is not directed at you in terms of your playing, because I've heard you do it all. But in terms of a branding, right? If you were to brand yourself so you can market yourself and say, this is what I do, and this is what I am,
Yes.
it can be
Yeah, it's always
difficult.
been an issue. And marketing people have in the past said, I don't know what to do with this. And some fairly established ones. They're like, I don't know what to do with your album. It sounds like, like 8 different things smashed together. I said, that's kind of what it is. I can't, but you're absolutely
Right.
right.
But you have to you have to be you. You have to do you. I
Correct.
mean, you can't. I always believed you can't really fool an audience, right? You know, whatever audience you're going for, you can't. It's like there was this interesting thing, and I wanted to get your input on this.
Sure.
There was this an interview years ago with Alan Holdsworth where
Uh-huh.
the interviewer asked him, "Oh, why wouldn't you play with a band like AC/DC?" And Alan's response was basically, well, if I played at 20% of my ability, then I it's not going to be believable
That's
to
correct.
an audience.
I
And
would tend to agree.
do you feel that way, where that when you're out there doing your thing, you're being Scott, that
Mhm.
when you let it all out, that the response is, even if it's, and I'm bringing this up because I want to relay a great story. One of the one times I saw you live, you didn't know I was there.
No, I didn't
It was
actually.
it was
That's
in
very
Philly.
interesting. Okay,
I'll never forget this night. And I was playing at the Grotto. I was doing a jazz gig at the Grotto on 23rd and Chestnut. And
yeah, I
this remember that venue. Well,
Yes.
down the road was, I think it was called Club Egypt. I can't remember, but it was first floor. There was clubs on every floor. Bruno used to play upstairs.
Oh, he would play in there. Okay, I
Jimmy
know where it is.
Jimmy Bruno would play up there. You
Mhm.
had the hand farm going.
Yes, that was probably in the late '90s.
Yes. So I
Okay.
come in after my gig and you guys take the stage. And I sit back with my brew and just have my face melted off. It was an amazing experience. I mean, because it was the first time I got to see you perform live with the band. It was trio, the hand
Yes,
farm and the trio. I think um, it might have been, if I remember correctly, it may have been before you actually recorded the first album.
might have
Um,
been.
but I do remember this crazy situation playing one of the pieces, and you guys got heckled by a guy who had too much, clearly had too much, and had been standing in front of the stage, basically kind of like waving his arms, like, I can't dance to this. What's going on here? He obviously didn't know what he was getting himself into. But I remember sitting around this group of people who were just mesmerized because you don't really get to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I would have called it fusion. Yeah, I mean, it was fusion music, but it was
But it kind of
intense.
rocked too. But it had like yeah, it had yeah. I
It was
and,
intense
and
thing, and I bring that up simply because of what you were talking about. Like, where do you put yourself, and where you get marketed, and but
that's right.
you out there doing your thing, and you and the band were completely nonplussed
Yes.
about this gentleman who was like, you know, because it was still affecting it. I find it interesting that even with your, you can, somebody can love what you do and they can hate what you do. But either way, you're affecting them. You've done something.
That's my preference. Yes.
Right. You don't want people going, ah,
Yeah. Right.
ah.
Exactly.
It means it didn't affect them. It didn't hit them. If somebody walks away going, I am angry at what I just
Yeah.
experienced, like, oh, I got to you.
That's wonderful.
Or, wow, I'm like, I mean, I drove home that night thinking that it's going to take me 5 lifetimes to even wrap my head around, which, even brings me to because I recorded, my band was in after you guys finished the Hand Farm sessions.
Okay.
And I walk into the room and you had left one of your charts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was great. I wish I had kept it, but I wouldn't have taken it. Joe DeLuca probably still has it, but you had left one.
Yes, that's right.
That's right. You did it at Why Me
I didn't
Recording.
know all this. This is wonderful.
Oh yeah. So I pick up this chart and Joe's like, oh yeah, Scott was in here last week. They just finished up the Hand Farm record. And I'm staring at your lead sheet. It was just kind of a reference sheet. And I'm looking at the chord that you had written on the staff. And I just kind of shook my head and I said, this isn't human. And I said, Joe, did he actually play this? He goes, oh yeah. We finished that record in no time. It was amazing.
Yeah,
it was great because to me, it's a piece of history.
Thank you. I mean, we had, going into, it's interesting you're bringing that up because yes, I mean, I was told in the 90s, and this is when I started recording and writing this stuff right after I got out of school, in 90 or 91, I started writing the material and, yeah, the feedback was terrible mostly because if you and I remember this was kind of the Nirvana and Alice in Chains stuff, which I love that stuff. It's
right.
yeah, I got but it was that time where if you didn't have a flannel shirt, it was forget it. And fusion, if you remember, was kind of passe too because in the '80s, at least there were a lot of people in LA doing it, or some form of it. You know what I mean? And as soon as '90 clicked in, that all went underground. And here I am trying to write this stuff where it's like a collision of Zeppelin and Alan Holdsworth and avant-garde music. And do you know what I mean? And it was, and
Yeah.
counterpoint things and whatever. And yeah, I mean, we got heckled left, right, and center. I mean, we couldn't draw flies. I mean, we just really could not. It was difficult. It was definitely very difficult. But and by the way, that album, I just recorded that for posterity. I had no idea I would be able to sign it. I had a few $100. Joe was like, look, I'll do it for this. I was like, you're a sweetheart. Thank you. And we did it in like 2 or 3 days. I mean, we just played the live thing. There was barely a lot of overdubs or whatever.
Right.
I just thought it was for posterity, to be honest with you, Chris. I thought, well, nobody's going to sign this. But I need to know that it's got, I recorded it for old sake.
Yeah, but that's the fascinating thing. And I remember Joe did tell me that. He's like, oh yeah, they did this live.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I ended up getting the record and I remember listening to it with that, remembering that, like, live.
The album sounds like a set.
It's amazing.
You know what I mean? I mean, it definitely, and I would say for mentioning Alan Holdsworth, the main influence there, I think, would have been IOU, because I remember that album sounded like a set too. And I liked that. I remember I like that sound, like set up and play.
Sound. Yeah, right. Well, and I think a lot of that might have to do with even, the style, because I mean, I listen to Holdsworth records. I listen to your records. I mean, not, the Hand Farm stuff, and of course, the Ripe album. The
Oh
right
yeah.
valve opens up and it's just like, an ice pick to the forehead. Like, what? Wow. But it still has that energy. But every time I listen to it, unlike when I say produced, I mean like a produced track where you've got layers and you've got this, like, uh, whether it's classic rock or whatever, where it's like we've set up these tracks. Whenever I listen to like the Ripe album, the Hand Farm record, every time I listen to your improvisations, I hear something that I didn't hear before.
Oh, that's
I'm hearing
great.
something different every time. And I'm like, and that to me is an interesting construct of the genre, of this
Yes.
idea that you can listen to something that, as you said, was set up as a set. It's live. We're in this moment. But every time you listen to it, you're hearing something different.
That's
Unlike an album that's been, okay, guys, we've got to do this, let's get the 15th guitar track in here and get this perfect. And you're going to hear the same thing, which is fine.
yeah.
It's got its place.
Yeah.
Listen to that stuff. And like you said, the IOU album is the same thing, that kind of
Yeah.
material.
That's
Has
it. Well,
that.
thank you. I mean, and to me, I about my writing, when I first started writing music for the band, I had the idea for the band in 90 or something. I remember trying to write like that and I couldn't. I can't write with like, here's a rhythm guitar part. Okay, now here's a melody on top. Like I can't write that way. And there was a time after that where I'm like, maybe I should just gig and forget this writing thing because I like writing classical music and all, but maybe I can't do that. And once I started writing it as a guitar piece and then just getting a bass line counter, once I started doing that, that was when I figured, oh, that's how I like to write music. It's actually all at once on a guitar rather than, it's like, it's, I guess, distorted chord melody, or I don't know what you would call it, but it's more like a piece for the, does that make sense, Chris?
No,
Kind of
no,
like
I'm following you.
all at
Yeah.
one. And then I had to write it for the Marshall sound. Then it was like, well, you can't write this, it's like you got to write for the Marshall. So it actually helped my writing to get more of those perfect intervals, but make it sound really interesting. Does that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
So
not
is
just
this something that is,
not just the up and down thing.
so as you're writing, like, I'm obviously, because I want to get into this, I want to get into a lot of your studies, but as you're writing, you're hearing these parts and you're hearing this. So in other words, you take one of your pieces, are you then, are you, and I know you write everything out if you need to, are you writing for the bass player as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Depending upon the parts. Yeah. There's like the bass parts were written out,
Okay.
but because they had to work with the, when you're doing this, and then it's like you can't just put, G major, like it's gotta, although there are parts like that, it's like a mix of parts. But I always liked writing counterpoint for the group so that it sounds like a composition, I guess. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
Even though it's blasting at you, the bass line has a real worked out it does certain things at certain points written out. Yes. But
So,
it's like a solo, then you put the chord, or if it's like do whatever, you don't need to
right.
do that. Yeah. So
So
that's
like
kind of
over like an improvisation section, you may just instruct the bass player, hey,
here are the chords. Yeah. But the heads are all written out.
wow.
Does it make sense? Like
Yeah, oh, yeah.
the part or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
absolutely.
Yes.
No, I got you. Yeah, that's all pre-written. And then,
Yes.
so and then you would go in and maybe, track it and then maybe track it twice and then pick the best performance out of
That's
the two.
basically it. Yes, that's it. And most of my albums, Chris, to be honest with you, are done on a shoestring budget, fast, 3 days. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's the way I kind of am comfortable doing it too.
Right. Well, I
I like,
remember like, the Pat Martino Consciousness record, you look on the liner notes, it's like recorded September 12th.
yes, yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
Like it was recorded, we did it in a day.
Yes, that's
you know?
exactly, and that's the aesthetic that I kind of like. I mean, I
Okay.
understand. I totally have regard for people that craft things in the studio that are marvelous. It's just not me. I
It's
don't
not your
know.
thing.
I mean, I guess if I was producing something, I would like that. You know what I mean? But as a player, I want to get in and out and just kind of capture it and leave.
Have you done any production work for artists?
I haven't.
No,
I have not, which is interesting because I always kind of felt like I might be okay at that, but I haven't.
that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I
I'd
always
love
kind
to
of
hear
thought,
your production. I just love to. That would be really interesting.
yeah,
So I want to get into the Dennis Dolly thing
okay.
because this goes back. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but the one thing about you were talking earlier about all this music that you were exposed to at a young age. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I guess coming up the way I did, it was like I got into the rock and the metal. Like, the jazz came much later, but so as you were growing up. Uh, was this music around the house? Was this always there?
No, I kind of, my brother listened to hard rock. I mean, this is the 70s, so my brother listened to the usual suspects, which in the States, which would be like Pink Floyd, Hendrix, uh, Robin Trower, actually. That's where I heard Robin. I got him from my brother. I heard
Yeah,
Robin Trower and that kind of stuff. But I was always into classical music. I think even just as a little kid, I
just
liked it.
okay.
I might have heard it on a Peanuts thing or something, and oh, that's Beethoven, and then I got hooked. And then I listened to Baroque music. But what happened was my brother had a Frank Zappa album, and he had Zoot Allures, and I remember I liked that. And then all of a sudden, I started investigating Zappa's work, and I'm not like a big Zappa head, but it was a gateway drug. What happened was I got to high school and there was a band director there, and I'm trying to transcribe Montana by
Wow.
right, so I'm trying to do the dental floss thing or whatever. And the band director said, oh kid, he's like, oh, you like that crazy stuff. He goes, if you like that, you'll really like this, kid. Here, take this album. And he gave me the famous Robert Kraft, Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern. I think it was Variations for Orchestra. And I remember putting the Schoenberg Variations on and just being blown out of the. I was like, this is intense. And it just resonated with me. And it was, it would clear a room, Chris. It was like when I first heard the Star Spangled Banner by Hendrix, he'd clear a room with it. I was like, this is brilliant. Nobody
Wow.
likes this. This is magnificent. And it's so well and it's so well crafted. I mean, it was just pure. I could tell the guy was a genius. I'm like, whoever put this together must have been, So that's kind of how I got into all this stuff. And I was always into John McLaughlin,
Okay.
um, and Shock T, and the mobbish new stuff. Holdsworth, I got into. It was mainly One of a Kind, that Bruford thing.
Yep.
So yeah, and then an old guitar teacher of mine, Kevin Kuhn, when I first started, was studying with Pat Martino. So he gave
Okay.
me Exit to listen to when I was like 14 or something. And
Okay.
that's
So
how I got into it.
you had a that's awesome because you were in these positions where you were getting handed this music
Yeah,
that sparked your journey. So
correct.
you were
And
studying
really,
coming up.
yeah, and really quickly. I mean, but I loved Matt. Like when I loved Randy Rhoads when I was a kid. I mean, I idolized him,
Were
and I
you
remember.
able, like, was it something that you picked up quickly? Like, I mean, because I'm going to get into your technique, which is beyond
Okay.
astounding. But was guitar something that you were like, I got this, or
No,
was it a struggle?
I practiced really hard. Like I remember reading an interview with Randy Rhoads, and he was like, "I go to all these towns and I practice, and I do, I stay in my hotel room." I remember being very inspired by like, "Oh, that's how you get that good." Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of went, "Oh, that's what you do. You work on it."
Hmm.
And then when Ingve came out, that was I loved that. I loved that Alcatraz and the Steeler album. I remember like, okay, now I got to get that. But I always had a work ethic on the instrument. But no, I'm not one of these guys that it fell in my lap and within a year it was happening. If that makes sense. I started when I was
Right.
14, you
Okay.
know,
Around
13,
the same
14.
time I did.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But
you
we
had
both got
this.
into it. You seem like that kind of guy too. Like you get into it and it's like
Oh
when
yeah,
you got
yeah,
in, you got in. Yeah.
yeah. Once you're in, you're in. Yeah, it
Right.
becomes an obsession. Um, so what led you to Sindoli? I mean, Dennis Sindoli, teacher of John Coltrane,
Mm,
Pat Martino,
yeah.
Randy Brecker.
Yes.
McCoy Tyner,
Yes. Yeah, all those guys were there. Reggie Workman.
Reggie Workman, yeah. And so, what brought you to Dennis? Because I wanted to explore, because you really are. You are the musician that's continuing his work. Matter of fact, didn't you just published something
Yeah,
recently?
I published a bunch of papers on him, and actually did a paper at the Arnold Schoenberg Center in Vienna. I
That's right.
did one, and then they invited me back to do a full lecture for the University of Vienna,
Oh,
which the composition department. So I did a full 1 hour lecture on that one with a bunch of
wow.
very serious people going, all these brilliant people, postdoctoral,
Wow.
But yes, I will tell you this. When I got to, I studied, after the Robert Hazard and everything, I was playing, after hours clubs and paying the dues. Wanted to go to school. So I went to Temple University, and I had the good fortune of my private teacher was a guy named Tom Giacobetti.
Oh, yes.
And I lucked out because Tom was brilliant, and he passed away not too long ago. And what a
Sure.
loss! He
Yeah.
was very kind to me, and he trained me hard. That's where I got all the violin, the Dante, and the caprices and the Paganini caprices, the Kreutzer, Mozart, Bach. So as part of our lessons, he was a magnificent reader and
Okay.
had good technique and all this. So I got a lot of that from Tom.
So now,
And
were you reading before Tom, or was
yes, but he really
okay?
straightened me out. Like we did a lot. I had maybe 8 or 9 things to do a week, and I sucked it up. It was just what I needed. I needed somebody to give me direction. I was kind of all over the place.
Right.
I could play, but I really needed somebody to know. He was a student of Dennis's. And when I graduated, he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I think I want to go to see Dennis." And he said, "Yeah, that makes sense." He goes, "That's,"
Wow.
and I figured, and I had always heard about him, being from our area, Chris, you hear about him. And
Yeah.
even when I was a kid, I heard about him. And I'll tell you, it was at that time, I remember when I first called him, he said, so you're interested in developing your own musicality? And I said, yeah. And it was quite an experience. It's like studying with a composer, with Dennis. It
Okay.
was mainly that. I mean, I did so much with him, but it was guitar technique, but it was ear training, and it was writing. I started really writing a lot of music. I had done it before then. I had written some classical kind of pieces and stuff. I had dabbled in it in university, but as soon as I got to Dennis, it was tons of writing for the guitar. So the early hand farm stuff and all, those were like chunks of lessons sometimes that I would
Really?
just, yeah. Mm, yeah.
Wow. So he was so there's so much mystique behind
Yeah.
Dennis. What was um what was a lesson like a typical lesson? Because I've heard this from Pat. I've spoken with Pat about it, but you were much deeper with Dennis. He was like there was almost a kind of like a, if I may, like a father-son relationship, right? There was a deep relationship between you two, in terms of an artist from one artist to another.
He was very kind to me. And he was very, he was great to all his students. He was very encouraging. I mean, here was somebody that was a part of history that absolutely was very kind to me, and very, he just nurtured it. He was very,
Right,
very nice to me, and he never, you know, he, there was no insults or anything.
right.
I mean, I mean, he had 4 weeks that he did, and it was an A and a B and a C and a D. And I'll tell you, without going into the specifics, but to get to the heart of it,
Right.
it was like somebody writing you um, a small piece every week, like Stravinsky, like somebody like that, Schoenberg, or something that level. It's like studying with Alban Berg or something. You
Okay.
would walk in and he would give you 5 or 6 measures of something, It's very complicated. Triple, double, triple stops on the guitar. You know, it wasn't this single. You know, a lot of times with guitar, it's like it's a single line or it's a chord rhythm, and this was like counterpoint, and this really inspired my writing. And you would have to play it in every position. So I would come in with 40 or 50 of these damn things memorized. Then you had to harmonize it. So I put the melody on every string with every combination of chord, you know, string groups. And then you have to sing the stuff, and you would have to, you know, I was doing atonal solfege with him. I was singing, you know, Webern, Berg stuff for him and all kinds of crazy stuff. Transcribing, I mean, he had me transcribing La Mer by Debussy, playing on the guitar, and Bartok string quartets. It was like insane, but that's what I wanted. You know, it's like I wanted that. I wanted to be. I wanted all. I wanted everything. You know, I tell the people I work with over here, and they ask about them occasionally. I said I just wanted as much as I could out of them. And to me, that was a part of that tradition of like those other people, like you know, the big great guitar players. It's like, well, I want to be me, but I want to be of that quality. I don't want to ape anybody. I just want to be of that standard someday. That's all. You know what I
That's,
mean?
you know what, dude, that's really heavy what you just said though, because that's an interesting concept. Is, you know, you were talking about you don't want to ape anyone, you don't want to, you know, mimic anyone,
Right.
but you
Absolutely.
want to be like. So, I've got to put this together because that's. I don't know if it's ever been articulated that way before in such a way. It's to say, okay, I'm inspired to be great,
Right.
great in the way of your heroes, but not
Yes.
to sound like them. And that's the thing about you as a guitar player is you don't sound like anybody that I mean, you, I
Thank
know
you.
it's you. And
Thank
I
you.
know
That's
it's you
cool.
not only through your play, but it's also your compositions. It's like, that's Scott. No one
Thank you.
writes like that.
I
Uh,
appreciate it. I mean, and that's what to me, I mean, that's, you know, I know different people went to dentists for different reasons and things, and there are similarities, of course, but that was what I was after. It was like I just want to be able to hear and play all of these concepts with my music. I want, and he was, like I said, very nurturing. I mean, I wrote string quintets and things with him. At the, you know, I got my piano a little bit. We just did everything. I just idolized that, especially those Viennese guys like Schoenberg and Berg, and you know, I really and still love that stuff. You know, and I just wanted to be that level. And you're talking about McCoy Tyner. I mean, my hero. And a lot of
okay.
the stuff that a lot of the stuff that with the hand farm has that, and my playing now has that influence. I mean, I love McCoy, but that's the thing. It was like I want to be my version of that, some if I could get close to that level. I never, you know what I mean, like when I was younger, you know, I would listen to, you know, Ingve or something. I got to get that, you know, because magnificent stuff, but
Right.
I never was like, you know, because I, like, for instance, with the Alan Holdsworth thing, when I first started putting out albums in the late 90s, the stuff was very influenced by that. You know, the first couple albums very influenced by Alan Holdsworth. But I remember thinking, it's like, this is a dead end. You
Hmm.
know, I remember listening to some of the
Wow.
stuff back and just going, this isn't going anywhere. I mean, I've kind of mined this, and this isn't being insulting to him.
Of
It's
course
like,
not.
but I'm me, you know, it's like, this isn't, I'm at a crossroads. This is, I
So
got to
you
move
made,
on.
it was a conscious decision where you actually had to sit down with yourself and say, where do I draw the line
Correct.
between who I love and who I am?
Correct.
Which is
And when I
it's a
first
different.
started playing, yeah, I mean, when I first started playing with Michael Manring,
Mhm.
it completely unlocked. Like I was already on that road, and when he came, I started playing with him and recording with him in the band. I was like, this is it,
Was that
because
with
that's a guy. Yeah, like that's a guy influenced by Jocko, but he's his own guy. It's his. I mean, and that's what happened to me. It's like I love all these you know, John McLaughlin and all, but I got to do me.
you got to do you, right? And that takes, it takes a lot of, it does take a lot of courage to do that. Seriously, because you know, if you, you know, you have a lot of technique, you have all this knowledge, you have this ear, you're like, do this. I could do that. I could do this. I could do that. But to say, no, I'm going to do me, and to put yourself out there that way. And, it was, it's interesting because one of the things that you had said earlier about, like, when you did your first hand form records, like, no one's going to sign this, right? I'm just going to do this
Yeah,
for press area. But you know what? You found a lot of success. There was especially coming from that South Jersey circuit, somewhat homogenized with the hard rock bands, everyone with the hair, doing it, which is,
absolutely.
they were all great. I
Me
was
too.
happy to know
Me
all of them.
too. Love it.
But
Love it.
you went, your direction took you on this great trajectory course, and talking about Mannering, Vic Stevens, right? Vic Stevens put you
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant player.
players, and here you are at the helm. You're the guitar player. It's like you. There's a lot of stuff you did. Like I look at your discography, and I'm like, I'm like looking at it now.
It's a lot of
Mind
stuff.
blowing. A lot of stuff.
I like creating. And yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Being yourself. I mean, the price I paid is I didn't, crack anything big or whatever, but I'm happy. Like I don't have any regrets about it. And that's not to say anything bad about commercial music. I love it. I mean, some of the most fun I've ever had playing guitar on a stage is doing commercial stuff. People dancing, having a great time. I love it, man. I mean, it's not a combination of that at all.
Right. Right.
I think what happened for me was I just kind of was like, I love teaching and I love playing. I love music. And that'll be how I make my living so that when I create my music, I'm not dependent on a fad or a trend. And I was never good at that anyway, to be honest with you, Chris. I was never good at like pinpointing a market and it just
Right.
wasn't there for me. So I was like, I'm just going to create my music, and I like my stuff. Like I don't listen to it, but I can look back at my discography and go, there's nothing there I regret.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a prolific, great outpouring of music that you've done over the years, and with great collaborative musicians as well, which makes it extremely exciting.
Yeah,
Um, that's the other great thing, is that and I don't know if you remember this, but I did have a lesson with you once. Um,
really.
yeah, this is back in, I think you were in, I've still been in Medford.
Okay.
Um, I think it was before it was right before you got married, as a matter of fact. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I had one lesson with you, and I went home and wept, and realized that there was. But no, what I loved about it, and what I love about a lot of the clips that you do put up, is that you have this. There's this immense amount of joy that you bring forth as a teacher when you play. Uh, there was this great exercise that I employed, and I thank you for it, because it was the only way I was ever going to be able to play over the giant step changes, was the very concept that you had employed. But as you, and in the video, I will link some of these so that
Okay.
people can go and see this. But the way that you went about it, and the way that there was so much joy coming from you. You could, some of these clips that you put up go way into some deep stuff, but the smile on your face and the happiness that you're getting from this, it's amazing. Usually you don't see that. Usually you see people very stoic, and they're like, okay, this is going to happen here, and this flat nine has this reason. And it's not like that with you. With you, it's that flat nine, it's going to make your day. And I'm going to show
Yes.
you how it's going to make your day. And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
such a,
Yeah.
and knowing what I know of you, and how deep your musical intellect goes, it's really wild to see that, in the sense where it's like, I, I get what he's talking about. I can see it. I can't do it yet, but I understand it. You have a really good way of presenting this material that you present, and also with a lot of energy, which is just fantastic. It's one of my
Thank you. Well, I
favorite.
love music. And from studying with Tom and Dennis, I mean, they were really great teachers. And I remember, like, it's a funny, Dennis was a character. I remember one time Yeah, he was always very enthusiastic too. He would be like, "Look at this." He would write it and go like this and hand it and go, "Oh, look at how it came out." We would, laugh and all this. And I remember one time I was playing and I'm playing and playing my lesson and going through my thing, and he's writing the stuff on the chair, and all of a sudden he goes back behind me to the piano. So, but I'm keep playing, I'm in my chair and I'm doing my thing. So I stop when I'm done. And he goes, yeah, he goes, come over to the piano for a moment. So I came over to the piano and he goes, Dennis was a good piano player. And Dennis goes, Ravel did this, right? And he played a short passage, probably Gaspard de l'Anduit or something. And then he said, he goes, your lesson is this, the one he wrote. He goes, your lesson is this. And he played it at the piano, right? And then he hands me the notebook and he goes, mine is superior. But
Oh
that was the
man.
kind of character. I mean, it was just like fun.
Wow.
It was like his appreciation of art and music, but it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. There was always that element of uh having a good time with it,
Yeah.
but it was still serious stuff, you know,
Yes.
still
Yeah.
serious stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
so
man.
going over the piano and doing that, and or
Yeah, it was
expect,
pretty funny.
it's
That
intense
story
stuff.
sticks with me. I mean, that was just hilarious. It was funny.
That's awesome.
He was a funny guy.
That's great, and it's so very cool that you're continuing. In a lot of ways, you're a continuation of his legacy. Do you have any of that as you teach? When you're teaching, is he still with you in that way as a teacher?
I think so. And Tom as well. Tom was a character too. Let me just tell you this quick Tom story. Like, he was Dennis would have you put all the melody in the different voices of the chord, not just in the top or whatever, right? So you had to put the melody everywhere in the chords, like a orchestral. And
Okay.
then Tom was playing through some Bach, the violin sonatas. He was playing one, and he was a fugue or something, and he's playing it. He goes, "Oh, melody up top." He goes, melody in the middle. Must have studied with Dennis. Oh, melody in the bass, like Dennis, like Bach studied with Dennis. It was just very fun. Must have studied with Dennis, but yeah. I mean, I love teaching a lot. I had to take a break recently just because my shoulder kind of been having some shoulder problems.
Mm,
But yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think those guys, and just on my own, I like teaching and I like working on music with people. I just like
okay.
the interaction.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I just really thrive on it. Probably as much as playing on a stage or anything. I mean, I like being around music and I just like I said, I do it. I'm lucky enough where I have a job here where I do it 5 days a week. I do it full time and I love it.
Right.
Absolutely love it.
Where are you now? Where are you teaching now? You're in
I'm at a place called the Academy of Contemporary Music, which is in London. There's a few branches, and
yeah.
I commute to the London one. I mean, now, of course, with the virus, it's all right now. We're doing it remotely,
Yes.
but yeah, that's where I am now. Now we live in Brighton and Hove, so we live down in the
Right.
south, right by the sea.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Very cool. Brighton Rock.
exactly.
The
Yes.
Queen reference there. That's awesome. Uh, we're gonna do part two of this interview, where we're going to get into some deep stuff. I want to talk to you about some of your picking techniques, some nerdy stuff, and we're going
Great.
to do that part two. But I want to thank you, Scott, for taking this time with us today and just giving us a glimpse into your mind. And our next interview is going to focus a lot on where you go as a writer and as a player.
That's
So,
wonderful. I look forward to that. That sounds good. And thank
yeah.
you for having me and allowing me to share this with your audience, Chris. It's nice of you.
Oh no, thank you, man. It's like I said, I've always been a fan. Um, you were one of those guys that was you were kind of like you had your own mystique, whether you knew it or not. But I remember, I'd be teaching, and I remember. Do you remember Tom Warrington?
Yes, he was
And
in the
he's
band for a while.
the band. So he would come in because he used to come over and hang out with me when I was living in Jersey. And I'd be like, "Were you at Scott's?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, he goes, "This is what I got to learn." And I just remember this. It was a kind of a monolithic thing to you as a players, in all of those things. You were also a driving force and influence on a band I had together for some years back in 2000.
Really?
Yeah, and it was actually the Hand Farm and the Ripe album that were our, every band. I don't know if we've been in studios before. We used to call it Inspiration Corner, where sometimes you'd be in the studio working on something or a rehearsal studio, and sometimes you just hit a wall. And so we always had CDs of our of people that we need a jump start, something that's gonna, you know. And the Ripe CD was always in the corner.
Oh, that's
And
nice,
yeah,
man.
my drummer and I would always pull it out and go like, let's take a break and listen to the Ripe record for a little bit, and then we'd come back and we'd have these, ideas. So
Chris, that's
yeah.
really nice. I had no idea. Thank you for sharing
Oh
that.
yeah, no, no,
Really nice. I have high regard for you as a musician.
no, I appreciate
So
that.
that's really nice. Thank you.
I appreciate that deeply. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you for part 2 next week. And thanks so much
Excellent.
for tuning in to Unsung Heroes with, hold on, I got to go this way. Scott McGill. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Okay, thank you, man.
Have a good one.